could have been out of them sooner.
We'll all make our own choices.
Steve?
Oh, there's salad. That was a good move, Tony.
Well, I think Ponce's gonna be talking. Gonna be here for a while. Is Mark still in school or?
This Friday, yeah, and then he comes home for a week.
Okay. The salads are good.
Salads are open, you broke it in.
Does he have a car?
It does not. this little RAV here, I just put studs on it. I've been driving that around a little more now. And then we bought him when he got it. When he can ski. You can start a little late. Yeah, we picked up a 2004 Nissan 350Z. Turning it into a little drift car. Signed him up for drift school January 2nd.
So he's gonna take it with him after Thanksgiving or what?
Oh, no.
Oh.
That's what he wants. No car until sophomore year. Which makes him angry. Where'd you find this? Yes.
Test, test, test.
Back.
Okay.
I was on, I swear I did that.
All right, you good? That it?
We are good. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for your patience. We are calling to order this regular board meeting of the Truckee Donner Public Utility District. It is 6:05 on Wednesday, November 16th. Can we get a roll call, please?
Thank you. Director Aguero?
Here.
Director Laliotis?
Here.
Vice President Bender?
Here.
President Finn?
Here.
The record will note Director Harris is absent.
Very good. Next up is the pledge. So as you are willing and able, please stand and join us. Joe, would you like to lead us this evening?
Sure, I'll lead it. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Public comment. Nope, I skipped changes to the agenda. Do we have any changes to the agenda this evening?
There are no changes this evening.
Very good. Which rolls us into public comment. This is time that is set aside for the public to comment on any item that is not on the agenda. Agendized items should be addressed at the time that those items come up. Do we have any public comments this evening?
No, Madam President.
And seeing none here, up to director updates. This is time for directors to comment on anything within the purview of the district. Do we have any directors' comments this evening?
I have nothing tonight.
Sure, I'll just quick congratulations and thank you to all the local candidates who ran for office this past season. I know it was a heavy push there at the end, but thank you for everyone for volunteering for service, and congratulations to those who will be moving on to taking office. So thank you for your time and service.
Thank you, Director Laliotis.
I have nothing to add.
Okay.
So that was good.
Very good. I don't either. I'll echo that. Thank you, and thank everybody for participating in our democracy. I'm sure you all voted. Thank you. And special business, item number 7. Here we go. Oaths of office for incoming directors, Laliotis and myself. We get to take our oaths in front of you today. Woo, it's exciting. You can do it, Tony. Should we move?
Should we buy the flag?
Okay, we're going to come around. Put down our napkins.
Raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Tony Laliotis,
There's a pin. Can we do it together? Okay.
Do solemnly swear or affirm, you can do either or,
do solemnly swear or affirm
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
and the state of California against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
and the Constitution of the State of California against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
That I will bear true faith and allegiance
That I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the state of California.
to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California.
That I take this obligation freely
That I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion.
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion.
And that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I'm about to enter.
And that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I am about to enter.
Thank you for your service for another 4 years.
Congratulations.
Congratulations, thank you.
You ran a good campaign.
That's the best kind. Oh. That's a real thing. That's cool, yeah. That's no messing around. Thank you. Okay, and as our first item, now that we have been newly sworn in, we are going to have a workshop on water and power regulatory updates and resource planning. So we are going to receive, I believe, a lot of information this evening, and we will get to discuss it and provide input and direction to staff. So I'm going to turn it over to Brian.
Thank you, President Finn. Yes, this evening we are going to have a workshop, and it's quite robust. There's quite a few topics that we're going to discuss, and really what I would ask the board to participate and ask staff along the way to stop if you have questions. It's a lot of information to process. But what we're doing here this evening is kind of presenting the framework or the initial structure. This is kind of a 30,000-foot overview of some of the new and continuing challenges that the district and other utilities are facing in the region in terms of regulatory development, some of the power procurement, financial pressures, and some of our strategic planning that we need to think about as we review the strategic plan next year in preparation for the budget development cycle for fiscal year 24 and 25. And so the district's electric and water utilities operate in a very dynamic regulatory landscape and market. This includes service levels, reliability and availability of resources, some of the environmental outcomes, and ultimately what we're going to see at the end of the presentation this evening is how it drives cost and rates. Next slide, please. The district considers this environment when developing our strategic plans, our capital plans, and our operating plans, and ultimately these drive our budgets and rate development over the next 5 to 10 years. Next slide. This evening, we'd like to map out some of the regulatory market forces that are influencing the district's plans now and some of the things we're forecasting over the next 3 to 5 years, again, in preparation for our review of the strategic plan and some of the decisions that the governing board will need to make in 2023. A couple of these key existing, some of these are key existing and pending California regulations, an evaluation of impacts to district operation and finances, and bringing together the district's mission, strategic plan, resource planning, capital plans, and budget. This all will eventually lead to a presentation in 2023 for board's consideration of an opportunity to develop an integrated resource plan. And this is really an opportunity to bring together all the driving forces, both economically and resource planning, for the board's consideration and drive our strategic plan in the outgoing years. The review of the key existing or pending California regulations will include some of the ones that we've been familiar with over the last couple of years that have been developing, such as the Water Resources Control Board water loss performance standards and pending water quality regulations. The recently discussed and soon to be implemented California Air Resources Control Board Advanced Clean Fleet Rule, which will have potentially have a tremendous impact on budget and planning for the district. And then finally, the Clean Energy Standard Development, SB 100, and the district's position in terms of the larger electric generation market through UAMPS. With that, I will hand it over to our first presenter, Chad Reed, the Water Utility Director. You can go over to the... Chad has some presentation materials. Again, this will be quite a lengthy presentation, so at the board's pleasure or need, please ask staff to pause, or if you want to take a break for whatever reason for further discussion, please take that opportunity.
Madam President and members of the board, it's a real honor to get to talk to you guys tonight about some different things that are coming up in the water department. I understand strategic means moving forward in a calculated fashion. However, I feel like I'd be at a miss if I don't take one step backwards for a second. I wanted to start tonight with something about some projects that we've had this last year that our water department truly deserves a shout out for. We had something that came up earlier this year of a leak over on Highway 89. It was a last minute type thing that wasn't planned for. Obviously, you don't plan for the leaks, but when they do pop up and they start becoming significant, it was a slip lane project that you guys approved. Excuse me. As we went forward with that, we started looking at alternative options. Obviously, open trenching is not an option. We can't shut down Interstate 80 because some people would get upset about that for some reason. We couldn't figure it out. So we went forward and we went with something new. And this is something I wanted to take a step back, that the engineering, from engineering to the installation of it, this is the pipe that we actually put into there. It comes as a folded over, it's folded when it's originally put in there, and the 1,500 feet roughly of pipe was pulled into there. They put 6 PSI of air into it. It causes it to go in and fill this up, which is something that at first we were going, wow, it's only 6 PSI, that's really not much. However, seeing these people work together, and I'm gonna pass it up to you, so give me 1 second here. This actually went inside of the pipe. So that's inside the pipe. That's Kevlar that you're seeing that's on the edges there.
No, it's inside the...
Let me get back to a mic there. So this is what was pulled through the existing pipe. The pipe still had structural material, or it was still structurally sound. It just had a leak that was going on. So they were able to put something of this nature in there. This is the type outside of the box thinking that it is so nice to get to work with the water department that is here. They come up with different things, they come up with different plans. As well as that, they were also able to complete their SCADA project this year. That was a nearly 7-year project that they did. So it's something that we're very proud of getting to work with them. I put this list up here though, because this is what's coming up this year. This is what we're going after this year. This is from the Far West CIP that you guys approved approximately 4 years ago. So when we look at this list, it is a very robust schedule that they're going to be looking at. But more importantly, it's strategic. And I use that word very carefully there, because each one of these projects helps us to go to our next, or helps us to go down to the regulatory actions that are coming. In 2017, the state directed the Water Board to come up with some water performance standards. Now, they've been working on this for quite some time. They recently adopted these standards in October. Each one of these different projects that were just denoted are going to help us with these standards. However, these standards came at a price, and they're going to cost the district, they're going to have a physical impact on the district. They start in January of this year, we will start submitting reports. At that point, we will be bringing back to the board on different times and different workshops how we're going to progress and how we're going to do it. However, again, the dynamic water department that we have is going to be moving around and trying to hit off-ramps and trying to do different things. A key word there is the off-ramps that we're going to be going after in the future. It is a very significant and not easily obtained program that we're going to be going down, and it's going to have a lot of impacts. However, water loss is not the only thing that we're looking at. Next slide. The EPA has come out with the UCMR 5s. So these are the PFAS. A lot of times you'll hear people refer to them, or the forever compounds that are there. This is 29 different compounds and the lithium aspect that we're going to have to test for 2 different times throughout the year. Now, at this point, this is an unregulated constituent, so that we're going to be going forth with, they're going to set up the plan of how this is going to go forward. So this, along with some of the revisions to the lead and copper rule, are going to keep our water quality people busy as well. Now, one of the things that, as we go forth with this, is there are very few labs that are able to do this throughout the state. And so when we bring forth the proposals to you, there will be very few bids, just because there simply isn't a lot of people that are qualified to do this testing. The no lead provisions in this, though, whoop, I'm sorry, I paused on you. Sorry about that, Stephen. I paused for a second there. Didn't give him the wink, though. So the no lead provisions is going to be something that's a little bit different than what we're used to. This is going to include a database of all the services that are beyond the meter. So this is a little bit of a shift in how we normally think. However, again, we're ready for this, and this is not a game ender or game, oh my goodness, what are we going to do? This is something else that we'll be ready to go forth with regards to the water quality. So now we have our water loss and our water quality that we're both going to be working on, along with our CIP. The last thing to kind of round this out is our, this time I'll give you the next slide, thank you, is the Water Conservation A Way of Life, Senate Bill 606. So this is what came up, and it was recently talked, and you've heard a lot about this in the news, about possibly lowering these lowering these thresholds even more. However, at this point, we need to get to the 55 gallons per person per day by 2025. And then after we get to that, there's another threshold that comes even further down. If we were to take our numbers right now and go forth, we're at about 110 gallons per a person per day for the year of 2021. So there's a lot of work that needs to happen. This is not going to be a one-sided effort, though. This is going to have to come from both sides. This is going to be continuing to work with the conservation. This is going to be us trying to make the programs or reach out to our customers and let them know about the different programs that are coming. It's also going to be a big stretch with regards to some of the outdoor water, or excuse me, some of the different dynamics of how we take the message forth in regard to conservation. To go from 110 down to that of 55 gallons is going to be one of those things that we're going to have to work collaboratively together and make sure that we're all working or all going down the right path. One thing that is important is this is not an individual thing. We won't be going house to house or something of that nature. This is a collaborative or an entire for the district wide. Next slide. As we've been discussing these items, we've been talking about different projects that we've had this year that have been helping us to meet these standards and helping us to go forward, from repiping things to tank rehabs to finishing up our SCADA and going forth when doing this. One of the reasons that we were able to do these different projects and that we're able to go forth on this was because of the necessary rates that you guys have put forth and the bond measures that you'd already put forth. That's what's funding these things. On behalf of the water department, we would like to say thank you for doing the necessary steps that you did to help us comply with these different state regulations. The top picture is that of the big truck day. So we send a little smoky, and the water department says thank you for everything you guys have done and allowing us to go participate with them. Any questions? Perfect.
All right, with that, our next presentation section will be on the California Air Resources Board Advanced Clean Fleets, and I believe Stephen Poncelet has called in on Zoom, and he'll be presenting the next section for us.
Yes, good evening, President Finn and members of the board. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Greetings from, I thought Zoom land was fading away, but through the joys of life and my desire to keep everyone safe, I'm presenting from afar. But I'm here to talk about the California Air Resources Board Advanced Clean Fleets Rule, specifically the public fleets rule. And this is one we've talked about for 2 years now and have been directly involved. It requires that 50% of the purchases of new vehicles starting in 2024, which is a short 14 months away, be zero-emission vehicles, and 100% starting in 27. It is a procurement mandate. It doesn't care about costs or lead times or the performance of the vehicles so far. And it's been a long regulatory process with a recent public hearing, and it's expected to end in 2023. So this is a major cost threat to the district, given the cost of the vehicles, the performance, and the impacts to our community. It's also a major environmental initiative for the state, so there's been a lot of opposition and support, and we have engaged through our partners. Next slide, please. So, role of Tahoe Truckee public agencies, because this does impact both the electric and water utility, but also all public agencies. We provide essential water, wastewater, and electric services, and we need the tools to do that. We respond to outages and operational needs, and that's 24/7, 365. And in December, we saw, our vehicles in the fleets for multiple days getting fueled while our crews rotated in and out. And we're a critical component of local emergency response. Next slide, please. We did put a local joint comment letter together, and I won't go into all the agencies, but Tahoe City PUD was the partner, South Tahoe, North Tahoe, Olympic Valley, we had Truckee Sanitary District and North Star Community Services, along with PCWA and a few others. We featured our unique High Sierra environment in which we operate. And we also talked about our specialized fleets, the off-road capabilities, and the fact that they work in the field. And that's the power takeoff. It's the equipment that allows us to maintain and restore our electric and water system. Next slide, please. So we put a comment letter in there with opportunities to improve and to really highlight the critical role that we play. And commercial availability is a major thing, and it can't be at twice the price and a 3-year lead time, maybe. And so that's where the costs come into the district, and it has to be a one-to-one replacement. We can't afford to buy 2 vehicles to do the job of one, and they have to perform in the field like we need. And then there was a low population county exemption that delayed implementation for low population counties from 2024 to 2027. And the original regulation had the word solely. And Nevada County's low population, but we do have a small portion of our service territory in Placer County, and so we didn't qualify for that exemption. Next slide, please. So we, in our comment letter, addressed specifically the one-to-one replacement, and Mr. Keats at the PUD did essentially the work of 1 tank of gas. And we did it for 4 vehicle types, but what it showed in every single case was that the cost was 100% more, and just the weight of the battery took away all the work of the vehicle. So no one-to-one replacement. Next slide, please. And this one shows the other vehicles. I will point out that this was a partnership, and so the middle vehicle is a Vector truck from Truckee Sanitary District. We have similar vehicles in our fleets, but we wanted to show the region. And then to the right is a vehicle from Tahoe City PUD, and we do appreciate Director Laliotis and his role as staff at PUD at Tahoe City in helping us with that part. Next slide, please. So where are we going? And where have we been? We did a on-site tour with CARB staff and board, and we had participation from President Finn and Director Laliotis, staff, and then we had all of our partners across the region, and we really highlighted, the realities of this regulation on our work doing essential services and emergency response. There was a public hearing and they heard us. And so there's going to be more versions. They're expecting this thing to end, though, in the spring of 2023. So the clock is ticking to get meaningful changes. And to date, we haven't had any. One thing I'm happy to say is that they did hear our low population county exemption concern, which we wrote and provided oral comments. They changed that to 90%. And now the district's compliance is slated to start in 2027. And boy, do we need those extra 3 years. And that leaves the rest of the state, and we're going to help them as well, because the rule's going to hit us all in 2027. And then next steps are more meetings with CARB board and staff. And then there is a possible legislative fix here, and CMUA does have a working group. However, our lobbyists have been clear that, this regulation is moving forward. So if we go for that fix, we really have to have exhausted every regulatory avenue. And that's what we're doing with the letters, the calls, the meetings, the tours. We'll do it to the end, and then we'll do what we have to do to protect the rights of the district. That's the end of the CARB ACF part. The last part of the regulatory section was on SB 100, which is the regulation that the law that established the regulation around 60% renewable by 2030, and then 100% carbon free or clean by 2045. And Joe will talk on this later and go into it, but we don't know what that definition is yet. And we're in the planning horizon where that's very problematic. So with that, I will pause and pass it to Mr. Keats at this point.
Great, thank you. In addition to the various regulatory pressures and the dynamic environment there, there's also a shift that's been occurring in the last 5-10 years with a increasing emphasis of focus on greenhouse gas emissions. And that too is changing the planning landscape for utilities across the country. So I'm going to kind of talk about how the increasing emphasis on greenhouse gas emissions, both in the regulatory and the public spheres, are impacting operations and planning here at the district. And before really kind of going into some of the specifics, I wanted to start by saying, I guess taking a step back, we have a lot of different pressures asking us to spend more money here and more money there, increasing costs for various reasons. Joe's going to go into a lot of information about the supply side situation. We've already talked about different regulations coming down the pipe. They're going to be asking us to spend more money. And rulings like ACF, it's not necessarily that we don't want to electrify our fleet. It is that we want to do so in a logical fashion that is going to be beneficial for the district and its customers. And so we want to go at this entire process very methodically and using a data-driven approach. And we want to keep at the forefront of our mind that what we're doing is we're balancing several tensions. It used to be, the 3 R's, right? Rates, reliability, and renewables. And that too has kind of evolved. And now, we back in February, I believe we had a workshop where we kind of put this image up there, where it's kind of evolved into rates, resiliency, and sustainability. So now it's 2 R's and an S, which also shows the increasing complexities of things, right? And all of those need to be maintained in a balance. And three-legged stools, what we've kind of always said, if you remove one of those legs, the stool's going to fall over. So as we move forward into this next budget cycle, and we're looking at projects and how to prioritize investments, we want to maintain these all in balance. And the integrated resource plan that we're talking about is a tool, a mechanism by which we can kind of incorporate all of these added complexities into a framework that will allow us to kind of figure out where to put these investments in a way that's going to meet the objectives that we set forth. So, because of that, one, it needs to be data driven, right? We need to apply a scientific method to our approaches here. So we need to collect the data, we need to analyze the data, and we need to figure out how to take our objectives as well as the regulatory goals that need to be met, and cast those into a quantifiable metric, a numbers that we can compare apples and apples, especially because as greenhouse gases become more and more important, the supply side, demand side, meaning customer side of the meter, interventions and programs are going to become more imperative to the district, and that's also true on the water side, like Chad was talking about. It's going to be both sides. We're going to be addressing leaks and whatnot on supply side, but we also need to engage with our customers to conserve on their end, right? And on the electric side, it becomes even more complicated because we have conservation and we have electrification, right? Two seemingly opposing things, but both very important. So how do we optimize and prioritize these things? So talking about data and data-driven, two kind of high-level initiatives that staff are going to be taking on coming in 2023. One is an internal GHG inventory for the district, where we are going to do a very detailed audit of all of our operations, and we are going to quantify what the overall GHG impacts our GHG footprint is for the district. And we're going to do so in a way that helps us to categorize things cleanly into those areas, the portion of greenhouse gases that we can directly impact or we are directly emitting through our operations, right, for which we have very detailed control. And then there's another element of it, which is our greenhouse gas emissions that are indirect, which would include greenhouse gases from customers' use of our product, our electricity or water. It would include employee commuting to work. Those things where it's not really directly in our wheelhouse, but it is something that we do have some level of intersection with, right? And so by first quantifying all those, we will then be able to go into a detailed audit of not only our operations, but also some of those other kind of scopes of greenhouse gases to identify specific projects that we could undertake to reduce those greenhouse gases, and then what is the potential of reduction for those projects. If anybody's seen an energy audit before, it's basically an energy audit, but greenhouse gases, right? Go for it.
I know that the town, the airport, like we've talked about, synchronizing our these sorts of inventories. Is this, are we doing that? Do you know if the town is engaging in a greenhouse gas inventory this year?
I'm not aware of when they are going to execute. I know they are going to be doing so. But we're doing it in a way where the resultant study will be comparable, or it'll pair nicely with what they come up with. And the way that we do it, the way that you do it is by scoping the greenhouse gases. There's scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions, and scope 1 emissions are direct emissions for which we are directly responsible, and those would be, our fleet vehicles, the generators out at the well houses. It would be SF6 emissions from electric equipment, et cetera. And then scope 2 emissions would be kind of indirect emissions that we have some level of control over, and those would be basically the emissions from our own electricity usage, is what it kind of comes down to. We don't necessarily have direct control over how the plants that generate the electricity operate and, some of their stuff, but we have some level of control over, where that's coming from, certainly, and how much we use. Scope 3 emissions then being pretty much everything else. So as long as, and that's a standard framework, so as long as the town follows that standard protocol, then what they come up with will be paired nicely with what we come up with.
Do you know if our timelines are at all synchronous? Do they know that we're doing this and we're expecting to have results in this summer 2023?
I know that I have personally dropped some comments at some of the various meetings. I'm not sure to what extent they are directly aware of things. The results, once we go through this initial undertaking and have a direct framework, it makes it easier to update later. Right, so even if it's not directly synchronous right now immediately, if they don't have 2022 numbers at a later date, I believe that they would synchronize.
Okay, I think we should just sort of let them know that we are, we're doing this now. If it's important for all of us as a region to sort of have similar, we take the temperature at the same time kind of thing, so. Thank you.
Excuse me. Real quickly, if I could comment, it was a great question, and we're working obviously with the airport, the town, and the other members of the CTA, the Climate Transformation Alliance. And our efforts will be to align in terms of the benchmark timelines, the benchmark years. What the district is working on is expanding our greenhouse gas inventory program so that it really is also more data-driven on our future decisions in terms of our renewable portfolio purchase power agreements. And so what Stephen Keats is working on is kind of expanding it to an equity model beyond just within the basin. And so it'll have applicability and kind of transferability to the other agencies who are also doing their inventory, but it's also more kind of specifically designed for some of the additional data that we need here within the district. So our goals are to align with the other public agencies. We chose to do ours independently, internally, so we could expand beyond what the scope was with the CTA.
Is there a question along those lines? Is there a potential that agencies can overlap their data, like inadvertently?
If everybody's following those protocols correctly, then they would not overlap. In the important emissions are the scope 1 emissions. Those are the ones that you're directly reporting that you're responsible for, and those ones for sure would not overlap. As you kind of step back in emissions, mainly the scope 3 emissions, those would have some layers of overlap. But only in the sense that, our scope, what we report as scope 3 emissions, somebody else is going to report as scope 1 or scope 2. So you can't aggregate emissions across scopes. You have to stay within those scopes. And as long as you're rigorous in that application, then there won't be any double counting.
Cool, thanks.
In addition to the greenhouse gas inventory, we're also going to be launching a saturation study with our customers next year. And the saturation study is effectively looking to better understand how our customers are using electricity, what are their plans for electrification, what is the actual saturation or level of different efficiency equipment in practice. What is the market doing? For example, if I was to hand out an LED light bulb right right now, it's going to go on somebody's shelf and eventually in like 5 years replace an LED light bulb that's currently in place right now, right? And that's because the programs we've been implementing for the last over 10 years have been very successful. And so we see high saturations of these types of equipment. Similarly, Energy Star appliances, refrigerators, dishwashers, et cetera, are largely becoming the market norm. So it then begs the question: should we be spending our rebate resources on these things, or are there other things that we ought to be spending our money on? So the saturation study is going to help us kind of understand that and identify barriers that some of our customers might have towards electrification and whatnot to inform program design going forward. In addition to all of that, I'm very excited about this. We have access to AMI data. We had all of our AMI meters installed as of 2019, and now we're starting to reap the benefits of having that data. And that data is going to be critical moving forward to understand the demands of our customers, the trends of those demands, and not just. I mean, we've kind of always had annual level information like what is presented in this graph, annual megawatt hours since 2008 and down below our peak demands for each year since 2008. So none of that's really new, but now we can go deeper. And so now this right here, and we don't need to dive into the details here, but essentially what it's looking at is peak demand week over week. So, if we look at kind of each week throughout the year, what does the peak demand look like? And then this is overlapping all of the years since 2008. We can see trends in peak demand. We can see how, we're clearly a winter peaking utility, for one. And then similarly, we can see how things are pretty well overlapped, although we're starting to see kind of some more spikes, some more variances, right? And so that would, that kind of kicks out as like, oh, we should probably explore that. Like, what's driving that? How can I better understand this? Is there anything that we can or should be doing to either prepare on our distribution system side or on our supply or our demand side programming? And this is just another view of the same thing, just kind of breaking them apart so you can kind of see each of them and their features individually.
What were those big spikes? Do you recall?
I haven't had time to like dive into that, but presumably they would be cold weather snaps and or holidays, particularly when those two things overlap.
It snowed early and everyone came in to ski.
Right. Yeah. Especially if it's like early snow in November. Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah, 2014 for sure. That's present. I think 2021 at probably Labor Day. But that's the fun of having this data. We get to like spend hours. I could spend hours doing that. And finally, we can dive down into hourly level data. In fact, 15-minute if you so choose. But so this is just I just picked a day. 4th of July seemed like an interesting day to look at, and this just overlaps the load profile 4th of July year over year again. And it's useful to figure out, hey, do we have a developing peak 4th of July or any other time in the summer? Electrification logically kind of extends, if we extend that logic, it's going to increase our summer peak. We will develop a summer peak in addition to our winter peak. With heat pumps comes air conditioning. People are going to use that if it's available to them. With electric transportation, EV charging, if people are coming up for big holiday weekends, they're going to be charging their EVs up here, right? So we're going to be seeing those increases. So this data is going to help us to better understand those, better predict those. Again, applying the scientific model method, we want to identify it, understand it, and then be able to build models to predict and figure out how to respond. So data's great, but applying it is kind of what's important, where the rubber meets the road. I've kind of gone over several applications, and I think that at this point maybe we could dive into like a specific example that's actually very pertinent because it's up and coming here, and that's distributed energy resources, aka solar customer net energy metering. The district has had net energy metering since 2008, and the plot on the right kind of shows how much solar was installed in different years since our earliest customer was actually in the year 2000, which I thought was kind of cool. But you can see that it really picks up in 2008, which is when we started implementing our net energy metering program, and also it coincided with the state had a direct incentive program that ran from like 2008 to 2014, hence the dip. But I think fundamentally, net energy metering started out as a kind of a state mandate. It was policy, it was code, and it was a rate that was designed in 1996 based on issues that the electrical grid was experiencing back in 1996. And the CPUC developed it for the IOUs, and then it got extended to the POUs. But the thing is that for the POUs, net energy metering it has stayed the same. They haven't changed the definition of that rate since then, but the CPUC has changed their definition of net metering for the IOUs since then a couple of times now. It kind of speaks to the need to kind of reimagine that. And the nice thing is that there's kind of a threshold built into the original legislation, which says that, hey, once the installed capacity of solar PV exceeds 5% of the utility's system peak, then the utility can define for itself what its successor rate is going to look like. And this plot over here kind of shows us that we're right there. We're right at the threshold. So, if we account for all of the systems that are approved and kind of in the process of installation, we're sitting right there, and kind of I'm projecting that we're going to cross that threshold probably next spring or summer at some point. So that kind of shows that we're on the precipice here of needing to define what our next version of net energy metering is going to be, what it's going to look like. And the great thing is that we have a lot of flexibility now, and we can design it in a way that it's going to be appropriate to our specific context. It's going to value that resource appropriately for our customers, for our community, and for the district.
Do we analyze PV capacity different based on the fact that snow load on panels can change output, or do we just, is capacity based on sort of nameplate?
The legislation is written based on nameplate capacity. Yeah, so it's the CEC nameplate capacity that we use to define that installed capacity.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. So, fundamentally then, that leaves us with this question. What is the value of customer-generated electricity to the district and to our community? And how does that stack up against other resources or other options that we have available to us? We talked earlier about how we have all of these different tools available to us. And on the demand side, we can juxtapose generation with conservation. Does it make sense to put money towards conservation, megawatts, or should we be investing in megawatts, right? And as it currently stands, as net energy metering is currently defined, we're paying about $105 a megawatt more than comparable solar electricity from Red Mesa. And therefore we need to ask, is it worth it to spend that much more money? Are we getting what we need out of that additional funds, or does it make sense for us to do something else? And that's where the integrated resource planning is really useful, because we can quantify all of these metrics, the cost effectiveness of a certain resource, and we can say, hey, up to this point, it makes way more sense for us to be investing in solar or batteries or conservation or increasing our capacity for a certain circuit. And it is noteworthy that the CPUC actually just recently, like last couple of days, released a press release with their current net energy metering tariff. I think they're calling it 3.0, NEM 3.0. And in NEM 3.0, they required that it's time of use, and every export of electricity from the customer is valued at the utility's avoided cost. So basically, what can they go out to market or wherever they're sourcing that similar electricity from? How much can they buy it for somewhere else? They're going to treat it equivalent to a supply side resource, and then they add in certain provisions on the time of use side that allow the customers to have batteries that can export at any point in the day, so that the idea being that they can charge the batteries with their solar system when solar power, when electricity is cheap, right? And there's a flush of it on the grid in the middle of the day, in the middle of summer, and that's the utility doesn't want it then, but they do want it during those peak periods during the heat dome, and so customers can then sell it back when it's more expensive, right? So it's good economically for the customer because they're charging when it's cheap and selling when it's expensive, and it's great for the utility because the utility can buy it from the customer at a value that is market value. So there's a lot to kind of explore there, and that we don't have to answer these things tonight, but that's certainly coming up, and that's a great real world example of how this framework would be particularly useful.
Right. And this is a very relevant topic because I've heard a lot from the community lately about why can't we do solar here? We have all this land over here. Why, and my answer is we can do it for so much cheaper through our contracts with Red Mesa, with UAMPS. We already have the contracts in place. We already have the wheeling contracts in place. We can bring this energy in more cost effectively, and it's already renewable. Instead of investing and it's not a bad idea, but when you think about the investment of infrastructure locally and the cost of maintenance, the cost of upkeep, in addition to our climate, it's like we are doing the right thing for the community with our relationships and our contracts with outside sources to bring this power in, and we need to keep on that message because it's very important. While I feel like we should investigate local generation, we also have to remind people about how efficiently we are bringing in reliable, renewable resources cost effectively already.
I agree. I mean, this local, it's the most expensive way to get solar.
Yes.
For us to build something here. I do think anybody who wants to should be encouraged to do rooftop solar, but not expecting us to buy their energy at a premium. That's not, if they're doing it for their own conscience and, great. If they're doing it to make a buck, it's a
Right.
no.
Right. No, I feel like, the customer's rooftop solar, as I look at it, is also a contribution into cutting some of our load off of, looking at the future for electrification. I mean, at some point, all these EVs, electrification within someone's residence, all these things are going to add up to huge demand. So if the customer can shave some of that load off of our demand, it makes huge difference, if that can be more globally, distributed.
That's what, what are those, now that the state of California has, regulated, legislated that we are all going to be shifting to EVs, what does that load growth look like for us? What, that's now that it's determined it's going to happen, not from market sources, but from legislative sources. We've got timelines. So if all of us are going to be driving EVs, what does that do to our load? Does it increase it by a third, by another half, 100%?
It could be a very significant growth certainly over time. That's a lot of energy, a lot of electricity, and it's being demanded all at once when they're charging. I don't have like a specific answer right now. I don't know that anybody does. It's kind of it's in the crystal ball, so to speak.
Hard data. Let's just assume none of us change any of our driving habits at all. So we know how many cars are on the road. road, and we know how often people drive them, and how far they drive them, and how much they pay for gas. We should have an ability to do a.
Sure, and those analyses have absolutely been done. And I think the big uncertainty is how quickly it's going to be adopted. And what is the what's the growth rate, the saturation of EVs going to look like, particularly around here. And then there's going to be residential EVs is one thing, commercial industrial is a very different thing, and trying to forecast for that is a very difficult exercise. But it's something that people are currently actively doing in California, elsewhere. I know that NREL has done some studies on what the load shapes look like for charging across different sectors across the country, and all of that's useful data that we would certainly be borrowing to develop in any sort of integrated resource plan. We have to forecast, we have to estimate what the loads are going to look like, and so we would certainly be pulling kind of all those data sources together to develop an estimate, to develop a forecast that we would then be annually reviewing and truing up and whatnot.
That's what I do see rooftop solar, for example, playing a role.
Yeah.
We're gonna need everything we can get at a certain point. We don't need it right now, we're already booked
Right.
with what we can do with solar. If we're hitting summertime, 100%, coming close to 100% renewable in the summertime for our utility, then more solar is not gonna, we
Yeah.
can't use it, we're
Yeah.
curtailing it, that's what they say. However, as we, I don't wanna, I think this is a fine line to walk. Like, I don't want to discourage people from investing in solar for their own resiliency, as individuals. But I also don't want people to expect the PUD, who has to serve every member of this community reasonably, and we need to protect our least resilient customers. Our customers on the lowest economic end of things they're the ones that are going to need our help and protection, not the people who can, of their own volition, put solar panels on their house.
They're going to need
It's
affordable,
complex.
they still need affordable power.
They still need affordable power.
And that's been my message lately about people talking about that, is like, that's one of our goals, is to provide affordable, renewable power. And we have the resources to do that. We've been doing it. Staff's been continually looking under every rock that we can find, and Red Mesa is a great example of a significant cost savings, bringing in another 6 to 10%
Exactly.
renewable. But you're right, there's a balance.
Yeah,
In it. There's a balance in it, and it's going to become more challenging as we move forward, so.
And I don't think, I think right now California's having challenges. There's not enough supply, right? There's not enough renewable supply. It doesn't exist, it's not built, it's imaginary. So, it's across the board, if we can invest in projects that actually bring more renewable power online, it's good for everybody.
Yes.
But anyway. Yeah, things to keep.
Yes.
Us, how to talk about it with
Yeah.
constituents. That doesn't seem like the PUD is down on solar, because that's not quite true. We're very pro-renewable, but we're not into paying more money for a resource that is renewable, that we can get very inexpensively. That's really what we need to be doing. So, okay, we're good.
I'll still use the three-legged stool as the example.
Three-legged stool is
Not
an
the,
example.
not the three-sided triangular yin-yang that was up there.
Puzzle piece.
This is a great discussion. I just wanted to add that, and this is a great discussion and mindset to start getting into as we go into 2023, because staff will bring before the board the evaluation of several options in terms of what the next net metering program looks like for our ratepayers, how we make sure that it's the most beneficial one for our community and our ratepayers, and the larger resiliency goal within our service territory. So
That you just reminded me of something while you were saying that, so.
Go ahead.
it was a question that I had, because I did attend that net metering workshop. It wasn't really a workshop, it was an educational event with Stephen. And one of the things that y'all touched upon that I really was unaware of completely was there's a safety issue when the power goes out and your solar panels are still feeding into the grid. Is that, am I misremembering this? Was there, I don't know.
That should be built into the inverter.
It should be built
Yeah.
in the inverter, right? It
Yeah.
should, but, because I remember the gentleman who was talking about it was like, when the power goes down, there's like 40,000 grid managers at that point, and everybody is responsible for their,
And if they want power, then they have to have an automatic transfer switch or a manual one to then keep our
I think a manual sounds like
PUD crews
terrible.
alive.
Yeah, I think.
Right, that's what it is, to keep our PUD crews alive, that's exactly correct.
If I recall in the conversation, it was just that. It was if you didn't have the appropriate protective systems in place, and then that rooftop solar was, redistributed back into the grid, then you'd end up with a bunch of different purchase power agreements and grid operators trying to balance out and make sure it was safe. And so the safety mechanisms are built into that.
They are built in,
Yes.
nobody has a manual. Like a manual, like expecting people to,
No, I mean, a
Okay.
manual transfer switch, like, if you have a generator, power goes out, boom, it senses, generator fires up, and the transfer switch automatically goes over.
okay.
So, yeah, it's only connected either the generator or the PUD, and so somebody could just manually transfer that over, and then everyone stays alive.
okay, because that's, it's
Yeah.
important. And it was not something that I,
Yeah.
So when it senses utility power is off, it isolates the solar battery combo from the grid, more or less.
Yeah.
so only the individual.
I just did it for a gas-fired generator,
Right.
so with an automatic.
No, I mean, that's the goal of an ATS, but with an automatic transfer switch, but in a solar application, if someone has solar and battery, that can actually backfeed into the.
You would
into
get the
grid.
same, without the batteries, there is no transfer switch, it just shuts off. You don't have power.
Right.
So you have to have a transfer switch
Got it.
if you want power during an outage.
Right, because people talk about this all the time, that your solar panels don't do you any good when there's a power outage, because you can't,
Unless you have a transfer switch
okay, and which most people
to
do, I
keep
imagine.
everyone alive here
Yeah, okay.
in the electrical department.
This is tricky stuff, there's non-electricians in the room.
Great discussion. If I could just make a quick comment and affirm. Thank you. It never gets old. Turning on the mic, turning off the mic. Director Bender is correct. The inverters that have been installed in not only in our Truckee area, but across the nation, since I believe for the last 15 or 20 years, they have to meet a UL standard. It's UL standard 1455, I think, and it's specifically to that effect. When upon loss of utility voltage, when it senses there's no utility voltage, it will automatically disconnect the inverter from the system. So that's part of every inverter out in our area and across the country. In addition to that, we have required our customers to put in a manual disconnect switch ahead of the inverter. That manual disconnect switch is for our linemen use. If they come to an area and they're working in an area to restore power because of damage and outage or storm, and we have mapped where we have solar installations, customer solar installations. So if our linemen so choose to be safe, if they choose to do that, they can go to that disconnect switch and have a visible open. So we have multiple levels of protection for both for our customers and our operating crews.
Great.
Technology, no big deal anymore, we got it. Oh, great, thank you. Real education for me. Okay,
So, great discussion. I guess it all kind of boils down to the need for a planning process, a planning framework to help us to, give us the tooling to make some of these decisions. And, my kind of section has been very focused on the demand side, the customer side of the meter stuff. And Joe is going to launch now into the supply side and the supply side considerations. Fundamentally, though, the integrated resource plan kind of is at a high level. It's taking our objectives, which can be as simple as what are our resource needs, how much electricity do we need to purchase, how green does that electricity need to be, what is the renewable portfolio standard, and when are we going to do it. To purchase it, how we're going to schedule it. But it could also grow and morph into including a bunch of other objectives as kind of, I've got some tiles here. Each one of those kind of has its own set of, considerations that would be brought to the table within this context. And so we just are going to be developing a roadmap to help us assess all of these things. And with that, I'll kick it off to Joe.
Well, good evening, President Finn and members of the board. Thank you for this opportunity to discuss supply-side energy resources. Oh. Yes. Thank you. So before we look forward, I want to take a quick look back at our current or existing situation. This slide is meant to be very visual between the green and the brown. Don't focus on the numbers for the moment. I'm going to have a pie chart that will further explode those numbers for to look at in more detail. The big takeaway here is the green and the brown. The green representing renewable or carbon-free resources. The brown is essentially market or natural gas-based sources. Our NEBO plan and our market energy purchases, which are natural gas based. So we have a diverse portfolio: wind, landfill gas, small hydro, and heat recovery. Next slide, please. So what did 2021 look like? Well, if you focus here on just the pie chart, don't look at the little bar graph to the side so much, but the pie chart you'll see in green, renewable and carbon-free resources. For 2021, we were at about 51 or 52%. Now, this was a little bit, if I would have information on previous years, this would be a little lower than previous years. And that's because, for reasons as we've discussed in previous workshops and board presentations, the western drought situation, lower hydro production impacted that number. In addition, one of our projects, VEO heat recovery, went offline due to a system failure within the equipment. So we had a slightly lower number in 2021. Next slide. So 2022, we're 9 months into 2022, or at least 9 months of numbers, energy numbers. I have estimated the last 3 months, so I've estimated what 2022 will probably look like. I've put in bold a couple of items. We've had a little bit more production from TCID. That number's gone up since 2021. And also, VEO is producing normally, not offline like it was for a lot of last year. So what does our big picture look like for 2022? Again, estimated. Next slide. You'll notice that the green part of that pie is a little bit bigger. We're now at about 57%. This is similar to what we were before 2020, in the mid to higher 50s. Next slide. So I also did a 2023 projection for your consideration. So my base, the way I approached the projection was to simply take 2022 and bring it forward. I added Red Mesa Solar in yellow appropriately as solar because it's coming online in March. I've got a little bit less energy accounting for that, trying to be a little conservative, and then I've correspondingly decreased our market energy purchases, which is consistent with what would actually happen. So how does that look in our pie? So let's go to our pie. Now you see we're about 66%. And for all you fans of the 1970s video game Pac-Man, we're starting to look like Pac-Man.
That looks like Pac-Man.
Pac-Man is starting to eat up at that unspecified and market energy purchases and natural gas. The challenge going forward is to start to replace those market energy purchases and natural gas generation with renewable and clean resources. They cannot be all intermittent resources, and that's part of what our discussion is going to, in a few slides ahead, is that it needs to be baseload resources in addition to that. It just cannot be done to get to 100%. Next slide. So let's talk for a moment about energy growth across the district, some averages. If we look at the 15-year term, it's a little less than 1% over the last 15 years. If I take a look at the last 5 years, it's about 1%. Those are trends that seem a little, very consistent. However, if I look at a 3-year look, we've grown, if I just analyze the last 3 years, we've grown 2% a year. That's very interesting. However, something that's maybe a little bit less counterintuitive or a little bit against that trend is if I look at the numbers for this year, we are trending almost exactly to 2021 numbers. We may end up a little bit ahead, so it's pretty much the same so far. So some trends and observations to discuss. I believe the ongoing effects of COVID, the use of second homes, things like electrification becoming more prevalent, these things have a positive or an upward pressure on energy use. They increase it. Things like conservation programs, which we have had historically for many years, and the growth of rooftop solar, both of these items have a negative or a downward pressure on energy use, or in other words, a decrease on energy use. So these are, which will prevail going forward is open for discussion. However, we believe that I think electrification, as previously discussed, electrification and NV energy, sorry, EV, flip the acronym, and EV charging will probably be pretty important going forward. Next slide. So a quick look at, again, to discuss natural gas and energy pricing. Natural gas has been low for many years, $2 to $4 MMBTU, or million metric British thermal unit, for the geeks like me. Because of the nationwide reduction of fossil fuel-based sources, other fossil fuel sources, this has put an upward pressure on natural gas prices. These prices are now ranging from 6 to 10. The latest forecast from the U.S. Energy Information Administration, USEIA, is for $6 gas, at least $6 gas for the upcoming winter months. This is the highest forecast that they've had in over 10 years. Again, the net effect is increased prices, market energy prices, and we expect this, our expectation is that this will remain for the long term as a consideration. Next slide. So a quick look at those market energy prices for the district. If we go back to 2020, we had $40 a megawatt was our average market energy price. 2021, almost 65. That's a 60% increase in 1 year. In 2022 to date, through the end of September, we're around $77, which is another 20% increase based from 2022 or 2021, pardon me. If I examine just a couple months for consideration, back in September, the heat dome that affected the West, we were paying almost $155 a megawatt hour for market energy. For November, our Nebo natural gas plant is offline. It was only supposed to be offline for a short period for its annual maintenance cycle. They discovered some broken rotor blades that needed to be, so it required a major disassemble and shipping of the rotor to a repair shop in Texas. So it took an outage that was only supposed to have 3 weeks, an outage now to the end of the year. So UAMPS has been diligent about securing some market energy for their members, including the district, in order to replace that energy from NEBO. For the month of November, we were paying about a little under $85 for a megawatt hour. So market energy prices, it has a significant impact to the district. In fact, you'll find out in Mike Salmon's presentation after me, and as we have previously discussed, we're probably going to be over budget. We are over budget, in our purchase power, and that the single biggest driving factor is that market energy prices. The takeaway, the bottom line is we can't control the price, but we can control our need for market energy by adding resources in an appropriate and responsible way. Next slide. So some resource planning considerations. Future load growth is likely. It's driven by not only the growth of our community, but things like electrification, EV charging. Another important consideration is that we need to convert our portfolio to that 100% carbon-free as California mandates. So we need to plan for those additional resources, but that planning must incorporate multiple factors. Next slide. So carbon-free versus RPS versus fossil fuel. Well, taking a look back at, we've discussed SB 100. That's the California mandate to achieve 100% carbon-free by 2045. That's a mixture of 60% RPS, 60% renewable, plus 40% clean or carbon-free. Just a month ago, or 2 months ago, in September, California passed SB 1020. This sets intermediate goals for that clean portion of the requirement. So instead of jumping from 2030 to 2045, it sets an intermediate goal of 90% clean by 2035 and 95 by 2040. So the passage of SB 100 and the bills previous, I didn't mention the previous bills, but SB 100, SB 1020, it means that these goals, I believe, will not remain static. We can expect further change. We don't know what that change is. And additionally, we must note that the clean or carbon-free portion of that requirement, the resources, California has not defined what those resources are. That's a further, it's a further level of uncertainty and risk going forward. So another consideration is intermittent versus baseload, previously mentioned on that graph. We have several intermittent sources, wind, solar, well, soon to be solar, and hydroelectric. We need additional clean baseload resources that can be dispatched, scheduled. We need additional baseload to be able to meet the requirement one day to be at 100% carbon-free or clean. I'm not saying we don't need more intermittent, but we will need additional baseload sources. Daytime versus nighttime. President Finn mentioned that in a moment ago about our daytime approaching 100%. We anticipate that in modeling of Red Mesa. Now we've had some additional load growth, so that 100% may not be completely accurate. We'll have to take another look at that again. But we'll need resources that are non-daytime, that are around the clock, nighttime, and those tend to be those baseload resources. Next slide. And of course, affordability and equity. We need to consider the impacts of rising rates on our community. Electric rates do have an important, they have an impact on our economic development and things like electrification. And of course, we need to consider all of those things that previously mentioned while balancing the timing of when we purchase, when we get those resources, how we diversify, and the risk associated with each. So the question is, well, what are our existing resources and what are maybe some future resources? So we're going to consider in three categories: those we have in contract, those we need to renegotiate, and some future possibilities. Next slide. So some resources we have in contract include the Red Mesa Solar, which is coming online in Q1 of 2023. And we also have in contract the Central Valley Project, the WAPA Base Resource CVP projects, which is hydro. Red Mesa approaching 10% of our energy needs, priced at $37 a megawatt hour. CVP is probably a smaller portion of our needs, and it's priced around 60 ballpark. The resources that we need to renegotiate include Stampede, TCID, and landfill gas with the City of Murray. Stampede Hydroelectric, we are currently talking to Western about the new pricing terms. We hope to it'll probably be later in 2023 when we bring this to the board for their consideration, but we're in discussions with Western. TCID, our neighbors in Fallon, we have a existing contract for 4 megawatts. We do this contract annually, and I'm happy to report that we just renegotiated this contract a couple of weeks ago, and the contract was a small increase from the previous year. It's about 3%. They approved this contract in November 1st. They won't go for a multi-year contract at the moment, but we hope to change that in the future. So we do that annually. And then finally, with the City of Murray, Utah, we're one of our bigger baseload resources, renewable, is the landfill gas project. That contract ends at the end of 2023, so we'll be in discussions with the City of Murray probably early next year. Next slide.
And so on the Stampede, how often do we have to negotiate for that? Every 3 years or every year or what?
No, good question. So Stampede, Western is open to long-term. They do their resource, I forget the exact term, they do their market, they have a term for it, but when they price out their resources, they would prefer a 20 to 30-year term. So I anticipate that Stampede would be another at least 20-year, possibly a 30-year term with Western.
And do we have to negotiate now? We're coming up for negotiations or what?
Yes, so they reached out to us. They indicated earlier in the year that it would be sometime later this year, and then about a month ago, they reached out to us and we had our first meeting. But there's not a rush, but we're moving forward and making steady progress.
We get 3 to 5% energy in that area only. Can't get any more than that, huh?
Correct. Stampede has a fixed amount of generation, a fixed generator size. However, Stampede it's the output of Stampede, the energy output of Stampede is based on hydrological conditions, how much snow falls, essentially, the snowpack. So with sort of decreasing snowpack, the western drought, if you will, the production, the output of Stampede and other hydroelectric resources has been on a downward trend.
Yeah, drought years and all.
Yes.
That was going to be my question for, if you're looking at a 20-year contract, what happens when there is no water in there? I mean, is there a refund?
No.
There's water in Stampede.
It's just a risk you take.
There's
It's
some.
just you roll the
Yeah,
dice.
it's low.
Thank you for the question. It's a take. it's a take and pay contract. In other words, we can't, if there's no output, we don't pay.
Okay. That's a good answer. So yeah, there's not a refund, but you're not paying.
You don't get anything, but you still have to pay me.
I will let you know,
I like
that's
that.
certainly. Okay, very good, thank you.
There'd be a minimum fee.
So a lot to discuss on this slide. The first thing I want to point out is that what has been bold and underlined are baseload resources, and we'll have a further discussion on the next slide. First and foremost, we've been talking with Open Mountain Energy, OME, about a geothermal resource that would be available to the district sometime early in 2024, so we're excited about that, a 3-megawatt portion. That's a pretty big, and again, that's baseload, so that would be a great help.
That was what? I
A
didn't
great-
get that.
Geothermal, 15%.
Oh, okay.
And then we have several exciting UAMPS possibilities on this list. First, I want to talk about a solar plus battery investigation. There is a company that UAMPS has approached that is combining, although batteries are nothing new with solar installations, but this is unique in the sense that they're doing it, there's no option to just take solar or just take the battery. It's a combined product, and what they've done with the product is solar is of course, a very peak daytime resource. It has a distinct shape, a distinct shape and hump in the middle of the day. What they've done with the battery is they've essentially made it look, it's not baseload, but they've made it look a little more baseload. They've flattened it and they've extended it. The flattening is because part of the output of the solar is going to the battery. The extension of the shape, so it's a flatter shape and longer, they're using the battery to make up for solar's problems when there's energy comes online when the sun's shining, so 9 o'clock, but the energy load starts before 9 o'clock. And of course, on the other side, the sun goes, the energy output drops off very quickly after 5 o'clock. But energy load continues. In fact, evening is a big time for energy loads. So they're using the battery on either end of that to flatten that out. So I think that could be an exciting possibility for our consideration. Another UAMPS project is they have an RFP out for geothermal resources. However, I'd like to say that the district was the first to think of geothermal and the need for geothermal baseload resources, but there's a lot of people out there looking for geothermal. In fact, a lot of existing geothermal has been spoken for. So it's probably not going to be for several years before we could take advantage of that, but nevertheless, they're moving forward on the geothermal side. In addition, UAMPS has their small modular reactor or SMR project. It's been in the news lately, more press about that. The district used to be part of that project. We got out of it in about 4 or 5 years ago now. But we still have opportunity to go back in if we so choose. The project is slated for the 2030, at the end of the decade, 2029, 2030. And then lastly, the Horse Butte Phase 2 addition. Horse Butte was always designed to have a Phase 2. The good news, so that's something that UAMPS is considering and members will consider along, the district can consider as adding more wind, if that makes sense for us. TCID, our neighbors over in Fallon, they're one of their largest hydro source, the new Lawton Dam, that comes off contract with NV Energy at the end of 2024. It's available starting in 2025. TCID has indicated a strong desire to negotiate with us for energy from that, so that's another possibility for us in the future. And then lastly, the Truckee Biomass Project, which we're familiar with, the project by the town, the fire department, and the airport district. That would be a nice internal generation, and of course, internal generation would decrease our need for outside generation. So that's an interesting project that we're continuing discussing with the town and doing our own due diligence. Next slide. So a quick discussion about intermittent resources versus baseload. Simply put, a baseload resources is something that's dispatchable. That means that an operator at will can vary the output at will. They can if it, just like the Nebo natural gas plant, you can run it at 20 or 50 or 100 or any place in between, and it can be varied by hour. So baseload is dispatchable, and again, it's something that can run 24 hours, 365 days a year. So the question is, if we think about renewable or clean resources, what are they for baseload? Well, there's only three options on the renewable side that I'm aware of. I could be wrong. Landfill gas, biomass, or geothermal. And if we want to qualify them a little bit, we would say landfill gas has a low availability. There's not very many landfills. There's not very many there's not very many landfills that have generation with them. And usually the output is not very big. It's not a lot of megawatts. These are not hundreds of megawatts. Landfill gas plants are usually less than 10. So their availability is low. And the pricing is, we would say high. It's around $80 a megawatt hour. Biomass, the availability again is low. There's not that many biomass plants, although that could be changing with the current economy and other conditions. However, the pricing is probably the highest of anything. The Northern Sierra biomass plants are in the $120 a megawatt hour range. Very expensive. Geothermal, I think, it seems to be a little bit of a sweet spot, or it seems to be the sweet spot of this group. Its availability is higher, and the pricing is less than the other options. However, that's also made it popular. It's being grabbed up. So it's in short supply. So we'll see what happens with pricing. So, which leaves us with, what are the base load clean resources? There's only two. It's nuclear, and there's hydrogen gas. Hydrogen gas, it's not experimental, but it's so expensive. It's 10 times the cost of natural gas. The example here is $600 a megawatt hour. It's just simply impractical. However, for the future, could that be a significant portion of baseload energy production? There's a strong possibility, especially if the price of producing hydrogen gas can come down. Next slide. So what does this mean for resource planning? Well, one important tool is something called an integrated resource plan, or IRP. So the question is, what is an IRP? Well, it's essentially a roadmap to plan out your resource acquisitions over a longer term period, 5, 10, 20 years. It simply answers the question, how do we plan to meet our future electricity needs? It's integrated. The word integrated means that we're marrying the demand side planning, which Stephen Keats touched on in his presentation. It marries demand side planning with supply side planning. And why is it important? Well, it provides analysis-driven, data-driven planning. It helps to ensure that we have sufficient resources to meet our forecasted customer need and to meet our regulatory requirements, which seem to be changing constantly at the lowest cost. And it also provides transparency to our customers, our community, about our plan moving forward. And so we have that opportunity, should the board choose, to move forward with an IRP in the future. Thank you for your time, attention. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
So I have one. Under that energy, 2 panels back, you had biomass truckee, For what, 24, or? Was that, yeah, we just estimated that, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, we don't
yeah,
have.
that's not.
Yes, it's being studied by the airport district, the town, and the fire district.
Yeah, I know we're investigating it, but it looked like it would be imminent. It looked like it might happen. We still don't know that either.
No, we
Okay.
don't know that yet. Sorry, I'm looking at questions that I had written down earlier before this, and if there are any that are relevant to this particular aspect of evening, and I'm not settled on that yet. But we'll have a chance to ask questions through, whenever, whatever. Do you think maybe we should take a little break real quick? Grab another piece of pizza, stand up?
Pizza,
before we
salad,
delve into the
How long
numbers?
more do
Drinks.
we have?
Do we have,
6 hours.
We have another 6 hours.
Is that all?
That's it.
Oh, well, we can sit here another
Yeah.
6 hours.
yeah, can I ask one question?
Please.
Can I ask one question
No,
about Joe's?
Yeah, absolutely.
The second bullet under why is an IRP important, ensure sufficient resources to meet forecasted customer needs and regulatory requirements. So I have a question, and I live in the water world, right? So when we forecast demands and customer needs, we can drill more wells, we can build bigger tanks, we can put in bigger pipelines to accommodate the need for increased demand. On the electric side, we can buy more power. I guess my question is, the local infrastructure, distribution infrastructure, is that a concern in terms of capacity to be able to meet, a 25% increase in demand based on electrification and EV in the future?
Thank you for the question. That will need to be studied. I don't know the answer.
Okay.
That's how you know it's a great question.
Yeah, I mean,
You don't know.
I don't know how I know how electricity works, but it's like, I don't know. Are the wires and the poles and the transformers and the distribution system within this district up to, we can bring in all the power we need, obviously, but can we also distribute it effectively?
If I could maybe a quick discussion on that. Our substation resources are sized so that when we have if any one substation goes down, we can serve it from the other three. In fact, in most cases, we could even go down to 2. So we have a lot of substation capacity currently. We're not, our peak load is only our peak load that only occurs for a couple hours a year only reaches about 50% of our total substation capacity. So although it will need to be studied on a feeder by feeder basis and component basis, I believe we're positioned well, but it does need to be studied further.
No, that's always been a concern of mine with looking at electrification. It's like, I know we can find more resources to purchase power, but it's like, what is it locally that we perhaps need to do to accommodate that increased demand? I know how you can do that on the water side, but not on the electric side.
More wires, woo.
Okay, no, thank you. I know that's a bit of a crystal ball question, but
That was a good question. Can we do it?
cool.
I might actually add to that, once we get to the point where like that is a concern, that's where the demand side resource, like demand response programs start becoming really effective and cost effective, because then we can say, we can spend a little bit of money over here to install controllers on everybody's EV chargers so that they charge slower and aren't pulling as much electricity during these parts of the day where we are reaching that high capacity.
Right. Yeah, I'm assuming that will have to occur, when
Yeah,
4,000 EV cars are charging at the same time.
we're gonna have to charge them at noon. They're gonna have to charge at noon.
Yeah.
It's interesting. It's a neat puzzle. There's a lot of things.
Sure, I'd call it a puzzle yet.
What do you think, call it a ball of yarn?
A ball of yarn.
A ball of
That's
yarn.
probably better.
We don't have any pieces yet,
Yeah.
all of the pieces yet.
We have pieces, they're just
Quite
scattered
sure how it's all
everywhere.
gonna unravel.
Okay, well, let's take a few minutes, let's take 5 minutes and come back. Do I have to officially, we can just take 5. Let's take 5. Okay, we're gonna take a 5-minute recess. Go. Okay. Now I'm. There. Now I'm on. Oh. So I'm looking at Directors Bender and Laliotis. Okay, we're all back, so we are, boom, we are unrecessed and we are back. And it looks like Mr. Salmon is going to be presenting next. Take it away.
Thank you, President Finn, members of the board. Thank you for your time this evening. So I'm the last section here before we bring this to a close for presentations. Always like to ground ourselves in the mission of what we do here at the district, so that's presented here. I'll probably talk a bit about that lowest practical cost, touch on this as I go through. Context, specifically here at the utility, this is just a reminder of the size and scope of the utility that the board is charged with directing, and we're charged with managing. Slightly more electric customers than water customers. The utility plant is actually larger on the electric, or on the water side than the water side. I'm sorry, the water side is larger than the electric side, excuse me. Stepping back a little bit to the U.S. inflation, it's in the news quite a bit these days. Just wanted to provide some context to that. This is 31 years of CPI for the United States, and you'll see it's a relatively trending with very few spikes. They're hard to see except for when you get to the current environment that we're in. The current October's figure was 7.7% year over year, and looking back 5 years, the current CPI figure growing over time over 5 years is a growth rate of 4% back to 2017 October. If you look back 10 years and further, it's basically at 2.5% to the current figure. So the compounded annual growth rate as you go back over time gets much smaller than the 7.7 that we're experiencing now. There's some years, some months that are flat, zero. Rarely do you see negative, but we have seen that. And then the current pace is very high, and it's causing that steep climb on the far right. 7.7 for October. The IBEW MOU benchmark is the San Francisco, Oakland, Hayward CPI-W, which for October was 6.0, is the benchmark. And then the MOU has a floor of 2 and a ceiling of 5. Some other national figures, the EIA, a federal research group, predicts this winter to be having natural or electricity prices wholesale side to be 20 to 60% higher over the winter. It's highly volatile, and its prediction in part relies on natural gas and the severity of the winter. natural gas prices and the severity of the winter. The Ukraine war is also impacting natural gas prices, as well as economic policies related to energy in the U.S. On the consumer side, 2022 is predicted to be up 8% to 2021. And looking at FRED, which is another federal agency out of St. Louis subset, and they have a specific CPI indicator for electricity. And October 21 to October 22 was a 14% increase for consumers in electricity cost. Some other EIA information. This is, Joe's talked about the market purchases. This is some EIA data by region on market purchases. And the highlighted Palo Verde is one that we've locked into here near term with the problems with NEBO, or the maintenance work with NEBO. And you can see that it's at 86 average price through September compared to an average back in 2018 of 42, so more than doubled. The mid-C, the second one there, that's somewhat, that's the figure that's utilized for pricing our Stampede. You can see that one's gone up, but there's some other nuances to the calculation, so it's not as bad as it looks like on this page for mid-C, but it is going up. You can see the average of all of them has doubled as well since 2018. So that's in the U.S. market. Now getting back to specific to the district, this is customer accounts, electric and water, as of for the last 11 years, and the growth rate for electric is right at 1%, and for water is right at 0.8 for a 10-year growth rate. The water is fewer accounts. The service territories are slightly different. And with water, you see in apartment complexes and larger residential complexes where water is frequently metered as 1 meter, whereas electric, it's usually individual meters per unit. So that's one of the drivers. We see a residential 39% versus primary versus 61% secondary homes on the electric side, and we're going to dive into that next. That ratio has not changed much in over all of these periods. It fluctuates by 1% at most year to year. So the left set of charts is 6 years of primary average KWH billed per customer per month, year-to-date October. These are all year-to-date October numbers, so they're comparable. It's not a full year. It changes a little bit with full year data, but not materially. On the left is primary residential usage average per KWH billed average per customer per month. And you'll see it's about a 5.4% drop to 2021 in primary, and then secondary is slightly up. I'm sorry, slightly down, and then the combined is down 4% year-to-date for combined residential.
Mike, how does a customer, or how does an account move from secondary to primary and vice versa?
Generally, that's established when they enroll with us to establish an account.
So if a home that was generally a second home has now become occupied full-time, that change is initiated by the customer, not by any type of metrics we see or use?
Correct.
Okay.
This is average KWH for all customers. This would include commercial for 11 years. And you don't see a whole lot of volatility. Weather certainly impacts this. This is commercial and residential combined. This is through 2021. This is full year data. And we're estimating the 2022 figure to be in line closer to the 2020 figure, so a little slight drop in average total KWH. It's down for residential and up for commercial in 2022. I think that's on the next slide. So this is year-to-date October 2022 versus 2021. Billed customers, residential up 1.5, KWH usage down 2.5 in total. And then average per customer, those combine by increasing your number of customers, but total billed KWH is down. That has a combined effect of 4% less per customer per month, average billed. So that correlates with the 2 slides previous. On commercial, you have billed customers up only 0.5. KWH is actually up as well. And so you have more customers, but also more billed KWH. So the net effect there is KWH per customer on commercial is up 2.4. Combined billed customers are up 1.4. Total KWH correlating to what Joe mentioned. So our total KWH for year-to-date compared to last year-to-date is flat. And then overall, when you take that total KWH and divide it by the number of customers, because you have more customers dividing into that, you have less per customer being utilized. Diving into purchase power now. This is a 48-month trend in UAMPS power cost per megawatt hour. So this is total delivered from UAMPS, the total dollar cost divided by the total KWH that was billed. And you can see the spike there at the far right, due in part to natural gas market, the Red Mesa delay. You can see the summer heat wave, one of those spikes there in February. I know the chart at the bottom is, the info at the bottom is small, but right above natural, the word natural is the Texas spike in February of 2021, Valentine's Day range, where that had a ripple effect on our purchase power cost. So the red dots on this chart are the trend the last 5 years. This is January through September data. On the red dots are the KWH purchased from UAMPS for the last 5 years, so total KWH purchased. And you can see it grows in 2020 with the pandemic in particular, I think. That's my assumption. Increases a little bit in 2021 and is flat in 2022. The green dots are dollars, and you can see it's not as flat. You can see the spike in 2021, and 2022 it continues to spike. So you got a steeper dots on the right with the green dots. The growth rate for dollars is 9.4%. KWH to 2018 is 2%. Remember, growth is both can be influenced by the utilization by the customers of electricity, as well as a growth via customers, which is 1% per year. So this slide takes the data from the previous slide and just converts that into cost per megawatt hour. Same information, just dividing the two gives you cost per megawatt hour. 2018 through 2022, and then the far right dot that's lower is budget. When we were working on budget in 2021, that started in May, June, lasted through, I believe approval was in November, December. The inflation was kicking in, was low in the first part of 2021, started to kick in mid-year 2021, and really didn't start kicking into high gear until the last 2 months of the year, right? And so inflation was not And what inflation was talked about at that time was transitory. Do we remember that word? It's a bad word now. It's a dirty word. But at the time, for 6+ months, the feds and others only talked about inflation as transitory. It's no longer used, that term. It's probably banned. We also did not have a Ukrainian war on our hands that is affecting natural gas prices. So those are some of the things to think about when you question why budget was a little low. Let's see. And that growth rate to the 79.74 that we've experienced year to date through September bills, get October's bill in the next week, is 7.1%. So what does that translate into as far as purchase power and budget? And the variance to budget is on the right in the red. It's a little small, my apologies. It's not a small number, it's 1.6 million. But on this scale, it doesn't look as big, but it is a big number, I promise you. So we are pacing to be, my forecast with 2 months to go is to be 1.6 million over budget in purchase power costs at the district. About 12%. That equates to $9.14 per customer, and that's 6% of the total electric budget for 2022. As the board's aware, we have a $6.8 million rate reserve, and that's, if anything, this would be an example of a reason to use a rate reserve. And we're still assessing that. If you use that money, it's a cash replenishment. It's not posted as revenue. It just, we missed budget and we're going to put some more cash in operating cash to offset it. And we would have to, it's in policy, we would want to replenish that. You just wouldn't have to replenish it in 1 year. You could replenish it over 5 years or longer or shorter at the board's pleasure, because it would impact rates, because you'd have to recover that, replenish it with a rate increase, right? So that's something we do have arrow in our quiver. And then another one that I'm excited to talk about is back in December of 2021, we had a massive storm here. And so that was, a year ago, a little over a year ago. And tremendous effort from the district side, electric and others, really the whole company was, spent a lot, weeks on end mopping up that mess. And it was a tremendous effort and valiant effort by the district. And the governor did declare a disaster, state of emergency, if you will. And there are Cal OES funds available, and we applied for those. It was a bit like a root canal and a couple other procedures all in one, but that process is in the final review stages. We've actually received $40,000 for the water tank damage on the water side. So that's great news. The next two pieces, we're anticipating review and receipt by year end. And that number is close to $1 million and a quarter. And so that would make a huge dent in this $1.6 million problem that we have. So you got to weigh that with taking from rate reserve and then having to pay that back over time, or knowing that you receive these funds to help offset. So that's something that we'll be talking about further, I think. Another thing we're seeing, we're not alone in these purchase power cost increases, right? And we've seen, in particular, I remember just last week seeing that the city of Roseville implemented for next year, 2023, implemented an 8% surcharge because of their purchase power cost overruns. So it's, instead of adjusting rates and making it look more permanent, they're adding a surcharge on top of their bill as a percent of the total bill before the surcharge of 8% to recover the increased cost of purchase power. Upper right box there, if we did a 5.5% surcharge, it would be equate to 1.75 million in additional revenues. So just something, I'm not proposing that today by any means, it's just something to be aware of. We don't know what purchase power is going to be in 2023. We know the gap between our current forecast in 2022 and budget for 2023 is 1.1 million. So if the average price for purchase power is the same as 2022, and we have the same amount of KWH, which we will, plus or minus a very small percentage likely, we would have a $1.1 million problem in 2023 to wrestle with on top of our 1.6 million in 2022. So I have more good news. Despite, this is electric utilities operating P&L and budget and forecast, and this is a raw forecast for this meeting through October data. We're almost through the year, so I'm pretty comfortable with it. But I don't know if we'll have another big storm or some other event, right? But as of known information today, we are going to save about $425,000 in other operating costs. Revenues will be close to budget. So the deficit is only 1.3. So that's good news compared to 1.6 anyway. As of today, forecasting for 2022, correct. And then just to remind everyone, this is operating income. These are, that's 4.5 budget, 3.2 forecast. There are many other things that happen after operating income, such as capital expenditures and, debt service payments and reserve fundings. So that nets to zero when you're done. Let's see. Since we're on that forecast topic, I did throw in water. Water utility looks a little bit different. Favorable 200,000 in revenues forecasted, and favorable in expenses 282 for a 9% or $484,000 favorable variance forecasted as of today. Welcome, Chad.
Borrow some money.
Oh, he's learning to spend it, yeah. Almost done. So just wanted to throw in a couple of slides, 3 slides here about budget 2023 since we're so close to it. On operating expenses for electric utility, they're up 2.5% to 22's budget, and water is up 4%. And I just told you inflation is running at around 8%. On a scale factor, 1% on electric is 270,000, 1% on water is 115, et cetera. Next slide, please.
Mike, so our 2-year budget cycle is 22, 23. That's where we are in our 2-year cycle.
Yes, we're about to finish year 1 of 2 years. And in that second year, we do the next phase of planning where we'll dive into budget process. Strategic plan, financial master plan. Next year is a busy year on my neck of the woods anyway. Another outflow for budget is capital expenditures. 2022 was a budgeted big year for electric utility. There's three or four, depending on how you look at it, projects that were delayed, so that we're not spending 16.4 in 2022. The courtyard building was budgeted to be spent in 2022. That's delayed to 2023, perhaps 2024. HQ remodel and exterior stuff, and then SCADA, building out the fiber. So that's pushed out a little bit. And electric is forecasted to spend about 3.5 million
in 2022, which is lower because of those things I just mentioned primarily. And then, the electric. And then water is going to spend about 8.6 million. And so we're close to budget on the water side for 2022, as currently forecasted. And then there's the 2023 figures. Obviously, the electric would potentially be much more if we, so that money that was planned to be spent in 2022 doesn't go away, it doesn't vanish, it's in a bank account, right? So just because of the project delay, it just sits in capital reserve. The last thing I would want to mention on this page is the 10-year CIP plans are 72 and 88 million respectively, and those had inflation factors of 3 to 4%, depending on the area. And as I mentioned earlier, inflation's much higher, as we know, but it's certainly potentially going to taper down. So, but those 10-year plans will be updated during 2023 for the next budget cycle, and those numbers will certainly be higher. They will not be lower. I can assure you of that. So those previous two slides were outflow, capital expenditures and operating expenses, and we pay for those with operating revenues. This is your budget 2022 and 2023, FY22 and FY23 budgets. And budget 23 has a 7% increase in revenue expectation for electric and 8% for water, which is derived primarily via rates and a bit of growth. And those two rates, 6.5 and 7.9 for 2023 for water and electric respectively, are approved and in ordinance. So it's not something we have to wrestle with in the next 30 days. Thank goodness. And the 10-year growth rate, so those are pretty healthy rate increases in 2022 and 2023. So just a refresher, the 10-year growth rate for electric is 2.2% to 2022. So when you look at a span of time of 10 years, electric rates have grown 2% a year, 2.2% to 2022. Waters have grown 4.8. And I'm done. I'll open it up to questions, or and then I can turn it over to General Manager Wright.
The purchase power overage for this year is estimated at 1.6 million.
Yes, sir.
And then the guesstimate for 23, did we have a number for that or no?
Well, the gap between, if it's the same price as 2022, the gap would be 1.1 million. If prices go down, the markets for natural gas in particular, we do have another great news event called Red Mesa coming online in February. 10%?
Thank you.
Approximately 10% of our so we're going to exchange some market purchases with Red Mesa at solar at a much better price.
Yeah.
So, conservatively, it would be 1.1 and come down from there to 900, maybe even 800 if all things stayed the same. We do not know what the market's going to do in 2023. So
Not gonna come down.
So that 1.1
Pardon?
that you're projecting includes the rate increase that you just talked about?
yes.
We were trying to get ahead, and I feel like
We're going backwards a little
we were
bit.
running forward but getting pushed backwards.
Well,
No, I appreciate you bringing up the OCAL-OES, I won't call it a grant, but whatever the
Emergency
reimbursement.
refunding.
Yeah,
the
the reimbursement.
relief.
Disaster relief, thank you. And I think that is a very relevant topic to bring back to the board to discuss how to redistribute that funding. Obviously, we've paid that in some respects for overtime extra expenses.
Get closer to the mic.
In addition to, what we would have paid for those people to have been working their normal schedules. So there's probably some delta there that we have on top of what we already spent. So, but yeah, I'm really be interested in how we can leverage that, that money to perhaps smooth out things for the next 6 to 18 months.
Thanks, Mike.
So, Mike, do you have any bad news, Mike?
What was that?
I've only got a year to
Only
go.
got a year to go.
That's why he has a sense of humor. One of the extra details when it comes to the kind of the overage in purchase power is, if you recall, the Red Mesa facility was originally scheduled to come on much earlier this fiscal year, this calendar year. And so the district's previous 5-year pool purchase had expired, I believe, midsummer. And so that wasn't extended because it was anticipated that Red Mesa would be online already. And so there was a gap there that exposed the district to the open market, combined with some other equipment maintenance, some of the other generation facilities. So it was kind of a perfect storm of timing there, or ill timing. Red Mesa will be on, we're expecting it in February or March. And then hopefully, in the subsequent years, which brings us to the integrated resource planning and how critically important that is. It's so as we kind of recap and put kind of anchor this home, this presentation this evening, you saw before you a lot of regulatory pressures, in particular with the water and advanced clean fleet, that are going to be, those are unfunded mandates that the district must manage, the community must manage. We have plans for those, and we're working diligently to prepare for those in advance, but they don't come without cost. And so, as Chad mentioned early on in his presentation, this board has done a very effective job in developing rate structures that protect the community. We've done a great job, the board has done a great job in the review and approval of strategic planning and capital improvement plans. That becomes even more important as we look out into the future. And so, as we go into 2023, we have one more board meeting scheduled for 2022, December 7th. Hope that day doesn't mean anything for the...
41.
We'll have some...
It'll live in infamy.
Thank you.
Staff will have some items for review and approval of annual procurements. And I wanted to also kind of just put a glimpse into that for 2023. We're seeing significant changes in the procurement and supply chain for materials that are critical for the district. There's a nationwide issue or challenge with procurement and delivery of transformers. We're seeing trends in the public sector where vendors or distribution firms for transformers are offering agencies to get in line for delivery, but they're not offering prices yet. And so it's really a challenging public procurement paradigm here that we're going into. And it's actually a national discussion in terms of national security and, the ability for our larger utilities to provide power for critical, metropolitan areas. We're also seeing it on the water and fleet side. So the advanced clean fleet isn't the only pressure there. There's a need to move toward zero-emission vehicles, or the ZEVs, but the supply chain for internal combustion engine vehicles is also challenged. We're getting delivery times of more than 2 years for what was typically standard procurement for a crew truck or a service vehicle. And so all of this requires planning. It's more than any other time in our recent past, planning and having strategic funding opportunities and procurement opportunities. We need to capitalize on those. And so the integrated resource planning really helps us with bringing together all of the data that Mr. Keats mentioned, the changes in our resource use characteristics, our customers' use characteristics, the availability of different resources on the supply and generation side really start to become a complex planning web that we're going to need to have, much like a CIP or a financial master plan, having a resource master plan. And so you'll see staff bringing some proposals to the board this early next year for consulting services, engineering services, to bring in other expertise. Some of the other good news with it is that UAMPS is also doing their integrated resource planning at the same time. So our membership pool there is going through the same process. And so we're really hoping that brings a heightened level of kind of efficacy or detail with our plan as we move forward. With that, I'd, want to congratulate the entire district for getting through another year and looking forward to 2023. We have one more board meeting on the 7th. We'll have some great items there. It'll be a pretty full schedule, but we are appreciative of the opportunity to present kind of a workshop format this evening that didn't require, it wasn't overlapping with a lot of action items that we have to get through in December. And that would open up for any open discussion, questions at the board's pleasure.
Thank you, Brian.
We've
Yeah,
got enough to digest.
you think.
No, thank you, everyone. This is
It was really good.
big and
Yeah.
just, really nice to see it all in, as you say, IRP.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's our new thing. This is good.
No, I think it's a great concept, and one thing just to thank staff for this presentation, because, nowadays we go to the store and we buy, last year we bought the same thing, it was $10. Now we go to the store and it's $15. And you're scratching your head going, why? What is it? Supply chain, this and that. But you guys have packaged what's going on with this agency very well, and showing us what our challenges are, and where we need to be focusing our energy and attention on to kind of stay focused on rates, reliability, renewables, for instance, and focusing. So I really appreciate it. This was a very open, transparent process. Those of the public who participated remotely, I hope they gained some good insight into what's going on locally here. But, we are not immune to what's going on locally and globally, so.
Yeah, not at all. And I might have to rewatch this meeting, actually, so that I can take some more notes.
One of the opportunities on the 7th will be for the board to set the board calendar schedule for 2023. Staff will propose some more frequent workshops, at least particularly in the first half of the calendar year, getting preparation for the budget calendar that'll probably kick off in August. And so this is a lot in one evening. We'll kind of disaggregate those topics and get into more detail in subsequent board workshops as we start to prepare for our budget at the end of the year.
Right on. Excellent. Yeah, I think you guys are, you're doing the hard work of the integrated resource planning, looking ahead. I mean, we can see this all coming. I mean, that's what you guys just laid out. There's all of these challenges coming down the road. But recognize them, seeing them, that is how we're going to be the best position to make the decisions to help us dodge as much as we can and get, prepare this community for the future, future-proofing ourselves. So I think that's, it's really vital. It's really vital that you are sharing this information with us and with the community, and that we can be, all of us, thinking about what we can do to help soften all of this for everybody. And I'm optimistic that, it seems like the world often works this way, nothing, and then everything has to happen all at the same time, which makes it very challenging for, districts like ours that do things like provide water and distribute electricity. And but after that frenzy, ball of yarn situation, 3 years later, we're probably looking pretty good. Let's hope. Let's hope. I did have just a couple of random, sort of getting back to nitty-gritty questions that I didn't ask in the moment. I think this is going to be for Joe, kind of simple. Natural gas, the prices have gone up, and we expect that to continue. And that was measured in MMBTUs. What does that translate to megawatt hours, kilowatt hours? Is that a same sort of thing, like when I'm thinking about it in my head.
3.413.
Like, I know what we're paying for solar, and it makes sense to me, but I don't know what our, natural gas resources, what does that translate to kilowatt hours?
President Finn, that's a great question, and I had it on a previous presentation. I actually had that, but I didn't include that on this one, and I cannot remember.
Okay, but it's
I
not
would be happy to.
One-to-one.
No,
It's not the same.
It means that you can produce a certain amount of, essentially with a natural gas plant, you're heating a liquid, water, other things, to make steam.
Yep.
And I forget the exact translation, but I do know that in general, if I can answer the question in general, when gas prices were in the $2 to $4 per MMBTU, that market energy prices were in the $30 to $40 range.
Great.
So just sort of like a quick
That answers my
comparison.
question enough for me
Quick comparison.
to connect the dots that are needed to be connected there. Okay, because I was thinking about the geothermal, which was sort of medium to high price, which was about 6.5 to 8.5 megawatt hour and kilowatt. So anyway, that comes in lower than natural gas with what you just explained to me at this moment in time, I think.
Well, with natural gas prices now in the $6 range,
Yeah.
you're starting to see like the 2021 number, and the 20 was like 60. Now it's market energy prices have averaged around 60. So you're seeing that uptrend, in pace with natural gas moving up as well. So.
Okay, because I do think you're right, natural gas is only going to become more expensive as there's more demand for it, as we retire coal, we don't have other renewable resources to replace, and we've got things like Russia doing things to the markets.
We're liquefying natural gas, and our exports of natural gas have gone up. So we're exporting to places like Europe, who are now being shut
they
off
need it.
by this Russia. So the demand for natural gas, a lot of factors.
Very, very high.
Upward.
Okay, just making all my resource pricing mix, et cetera. And you know what? Anything else? You guys did a really great job of pre-answering a lot of my questions that I came in with. I will go through with a fine-tooth comb on my own and reach out with things that I still am looking for answers to. But that was not many. There's not many. You guys really covered a lot of territory, so thank you very much. Do we have any other questions from the board, or?
Clean fleet.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I was just thinking about it, aircraft carriers, super reliable. We got to have them for safety for our country. They run on nukes.
Nukes, yeah.
The other naval ships, they're diesel, right? We use fuel and we have these things. So clean fleet for big giant trucks that we use with 20 feet of snow like we had last year. I just, how realistic are they going to inflict clean fleet on us? And then looking the other way, how realistic is it for us to kind of bypass that beyond 2027? It's just like, when it's snowing, those batteries aren't going to work. You need a big rig to handle what's the emergency situation. And right now, that's not in a clean fleet with anything that's on the market. And that's why I'm referencing our naval fleet, which is not, it's not on batteries. It's on nukes and diesel.
Nuclear-powered trucks, is that what you're?
Where are we going here?
I'm just saying, I just think it's like the REACH code thing. And, I just, going all electric and just dumping fuel, I'm an energy geek with buildings and all that stuff. and California has like the most stringent electric or energy code, probably in really top 10 in the world. And here we are, a little mountain community trying to save the world with this clean fleet stuff. So I guess it really hits a note inside of me of, let's just be realistic here for what we're doing for our small mountain community that we want to live in and enjoy life, yet with this clean fleet stuff, with the REACH code, well, we're just kicking out all the people that can't barely afford here. Well, then don't even bother trying to move here if you can't afford it, because now we're just making it insanely expensive with potentially a clean fleet that just doesn't even exist. And then I talk about the REACH code thing as well, that just, makes it even more unaffordable. And then we want to have power during these storms. So I get a little fired up.
The bottom line with CARB is they're putting public agencies in a position to be the research and development for a market that doesn't exist yet. And they're putting the public agencies in front of the private industry, which then puts our taxpayers and ratepayers in a position to have to fund the R&D for an industry that doesn't exist. And that's the biggest challenge with what CARB's trying to do right now with this advanced clean fleets. And they're approaching it like, if we decide to say you are going to do this, then the industry will develop behind it. Instead of taking the approach like, let's partner with people who can help develop the industry, provide matching funding, and encourage the development of this industry and work with the public utilities to be the test bed of this industry, and not forcing it down our throats and expecting the industry to fill the gap just based on need that sort of is artificially being created by their regulatory actions. That's the hard part for me with advanced clean fleets. It's putting our taxpayers and our ratepayers in a position to fund the development of an industry.
It just compounds what Mike was, the 7% here, 15% here. It's like we were trying to get ahead, but then with all this stuff, it's like boom, boom, and then just a couple good uppercuts, and then, then another one. It's like, okay, clean fleet, well, so we want to get our power poles back up. It's like you're not doing that with a battery-powered
No. So,
truck.
Stephen Poncelet did say that the one concession that did in fact happen is that compliance for us doesn't start till 2027. Was that an actual thing that I understood from Stephen's presentation about the CARB Clean Fleet thing, like as a response to the education day that we did here with CARB and the letter that everybody wrote? Does that,
Yeah,
okay, because it was 2024.
we were successful in pushing back the first benchmark or milestone.
Okay.
So we still would, as currently drafted, be subject to the final compliance period. We're just an extension or waiver based on the counties and type of agency for that first milestone.
Okay, and that's because we got out of the small population.
Correct.
Oh, wow, okay, so that wasn't even for everybody across the board, it was just kind of specifically for us.
It could impact other utilities, but
Okay,
as an example, it did not help Tahoe City PUD
okay.
out of that.
Well, I'm sorry, Tony.
Because we're,
Yeah.
We're stuck in Placer and
You're stuck in
El Dorado
Placer.
counties, and we're not, while we're a small rural pocket of Placer
Okay.
County.
So that was
doesn't-
definitely
That
a,
doesn't bring any advantage because of the rest of the population of the county. So it does help this agency.
but not-
Which is a win, and you can't deny that.
well, it's a very partial win, I mean.
And look past that,
it's
but
very-
yeah, it's not a universal win for
No.
public agencies.
No, it's not, it's definitely a cart
I
before
just
the
feel like
horse.
2027 is just too soon.
It certainly is, I mean,
it's-
that's.
Well, one of the things one of the details in the the regulation as currently drafted is that it doesn't mean delivery and utilization by 2027. It means that purchase orders are issued and procurements are made by 2027 for delivery of those vehicles. And so one of the arguments the collective voice of North Tahoe and the Truckee Basin have made that make that timeline commensurate with commercial availability. Don't force the public agencies, as Director Laliotas pointed out, to beta test new technology, make the technology commercially available, and then make that timeline for procurement then.
Yeah.
Because I think collectively, everyone agrees that transportation sector is a huge issue in the total carbon reduction and greenhouse gas reduction. But to place the burden or initial burden on the public sector with critical, essential equipment is, in our opinion, not a responsible approach.
Yeah, it's a little reckless.
We're
I mean,
not
utilities should
converting
not.
our aircraft carriers to batteries.
Yes.
For the moment.
We've already got nuclear.
So for the moment, it's just like, you still need those cities on the sea.
One of the other nuances is that we're talking a lot about EVs, electric vehicles. It's actually zero emission vehicles. And so one of the recommendations also is for the heavier fleet, where this regulation is specifically focused on the likelihood of other fuel sources being more efficient or effective, like hydrogen or some other fuel cell. Let that evolve and become commercially available as well. The electric 15,000-pound, 12,000-pound vehicles are very, difficult to engineer and pencil out.
Interesting.
Well, Tony, the thing is, the legislatures are forcing us to do these things. And it started like with renewable power. Because they said, hey, you gotta have 30% by July the 24th. I mean, try to have it. No, not try to have it, have it. And then they up the next year, it's gotta be 35% in 6 months or whatever, but they're the ones that are passing the laws and forcing us to do these things, and now this electric thing is, I can't believe it. First, there was the little gas engines. The little gas engines that every contractor in the world uses every day for emergencies or for mixing cement or whatever. And I'd like to see these electric machines do what these.
Right. Well, I think,
gas-powered-
I think as Stephen alluded to in his presentation, that we are trying we're trying the regulatory route to.
I can see you change a watch or a clock or something like that, but
Right. No,
ten-ton
it's.
diesel.
Yeah, no, we are doing the right thing by what the presentations, the CARB meetings. We're trying to approach this from the regulatory standpoint, and we are not going to end with that.
No.
There is a legislative approach, and once we feel confident we've, checked as many boxes and knocked on as many doors as we can, we have other options to bring back to light that, what essential services mean in the whole scope of the transportation and public sector. And, when police, fire, EMS, and snowplows are exempted from
Exactly.
these laws, where do we fit in?
Right, we should fit in probably
Right there. Yeah, right there. Right next to
So-
fire is
Yeah.
water.
So that's the next step. and-
Wait,
Yeah,
Hey.
that's the next
then to get
step.
the water, you need the power. so-
Power,
Yeah, that's the next step, and, I know there's many agencies are willing to go there, and we have a lot of backing with a lot of our partners, so.
Yeah, no, I think it may not be pleasant.
No,
There's, the rules of the physical world are dictating that we can't do this right now. Like you
Right.
said, it's just impossible. They don't exist. It's not, so there's that.
well, sometimes we have to approach things in that respect to decide that aspirational goals just aren't
Well, they're
feasible.
aspirational, which doesn't mean you accomplish them in the time, in the budget that has been set.
Yeah.
So we try,
We try.
we try.
Well, and don't get me wrong about the electrification.
I'm not getting you wrong.
I
I get where
I
you're
am
coming
doing
from.
it right now on a remodel, so I'm geeking out, I'm heat pumping. Joe knows, I bothered him like too many times. But I upgraded my panels to 200 amperes so we can do the
Let us know how
EV
it goes.
chargers and heat pumps, and I just bought hybrid electric heat pump water heaters, so.
Well, you know,
Smooth the way for the rest of us, Jeff, and let us know the yeses and the nos. Don't do this, do
Dr. Holmes
this.
right behind us
Just brings to
here.
light how important it is to listen to your customers and your constituents.
Dr. Holmes behind
and-
us was supposed to be all electric when they started it. And they changed that right away.
It's a heavy lift. It's hard
Oil
to do.
heat, they had oil, propane, what have you.
It's getting better and better, though.
They don't
We're,
have electricity in their houses and stuff, they got lights, but it's not all electric like it. There was a big push for all electric in those days.
What
Not
about
as big as
critical
now.
inventory? Like when I placed the order for my electrical panel, it was like a 9-month lead time. So, how is this district looking at critical inventory?
I mean, clearly, we don't have a bunch of transformers laying around.
Right.
Panel at home,
Well, I ordered a new one and it's not arriving until next summer.
It's behind the Red Mesa.
No, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, up until this
And
point,
that worries me. You know, I just want to reiterate how appreciative I am of listening to everything. It's just pretty awesome to hear it all in one, 1 to 2 hour session here that we did. So I just want to say that was huge, and say thank you again.
we appreciate that. The department heads with each of the operational groups and our buyer work diligently on this, on identifying resources that we need to have in excess quantities, and then, it's
Doubling it.
It's, yes. One of the things that was discussed earlier today, our team is working on annual procurement and how do we create cooperative alliances to purchase things in larger quantities, but have them available within partnerships. So similar like a mutual aid system where regionally, perhaps our local public partners, we purchase common goods in unison and we can have kind of an internal market there. One of the challenges is, how do we do that where perhaps our standards aren't the same as in terms of our materials, our equipment, we might have different construction standards, we might have different equipment, so it's a challenge there. But we definitely know that the future isn't going to be, the immediate future is not going to be any easier. And we're seeing kind of the long-term supply chain effects with pipe. Kaufman, one of our engineers for the pipeline project this year, scoured the western region looking for, I think, 10-inch or 12-inch pipe to make sure a project got in on time. Our electric crews are considering, repairing transformers as opposed to buying new ones or repurposing ones that are perhaps oversized in one section. They could take a smaller one and shifting those around as kind of our backup redundant plan if supply chains get tough there. But it's not just, the PUD. We're getting support requests from PG&E, Edison, with their transformer inventory as well.
I'm done.
Okay, are we done?
I'm done.
I was just
Did we
giving
reach
the
your
last look. I
goals
think
tonight
we're
to
pretty
kinda-
good.
adjourn.
I think so. That's where I'm heading towards. We're moving to adjourn. Is there any other pressing things that we need to air out? Because I'm
I just was
satisfied.
asking, did we achieve?
We absolutely did. At the
okay.
final.
I feel like I learned a lot.
The final deliverable would be feedback from the board. Doesn't have to be this evening, but in future board workshops, if you want a different format or you want to follow up on some more specifics or different topics, I would encourage all of the board members individually to reach out to me and kind of looking out over the next couple of months, what types of workshops, what topics. We have some package that we'd like to present in preparation for the strategic plan review and budget. But if there are items out there that particularly have value for the board to review collectively, I would encourage you to reach out to me and let's get those put together.
Was great now.
It really
Just
was.
thinking about strategic planning we needed this, so.
Yeah.
Again, I think the 5th time I've said thank you.
Don't put out anything that costs money.
Well, that really narrows things down. Okay, I'm sorry. We are going to adjourn. We all good? We're good? Okay.
Good, is everyone good?
There.
Thank you.
We're off the record.